I'm Bill Zimnowitz, and I work at Jennings Community Learning Center, which is down the street from here at 2455 University. And I'm currently the Vice President of EdVisions Co-op. And every year at the conference, since I've been, I think my first time was 2003, is that we brought in practitioners and had them kind of share with what they do. And we couldn't get anybody any good, so we did ask Dave if he'd share some things with us.
Thank you.
Some years the talent pool just kind of drops. But anyhow, Dave works at a school, Northern Lights Community School in Warba, Minnesota. And I've known Dave for 15 years maybe. And you know, I've always worked at South St. Paul and him in Grand Rapids at the time. And we've always shared the same progressive ideals on education and working with kids. And I saw on the agenda, I said, Hagman. Apparently they didn't get anybody. So, and then Stephen just asked me to introduce him. But Dave is, well, not that my word means anything. In fact, it might even lower the stock. But he's very, his school, the things he's doing is great. He just came to visit with our staff, and it's astonishing how much stuff they do. And it's all centered around kids and learning. David?
I don't know if any of you guys listen to Garrison Keeler from time to time, but he talks about Lutherans quite a bit. Norwegian Lutherans, and I'm one of them. And most of the time, it's usually focused on not wanting to be the center of attention. If you're at a special event in the church, the Lutherans are most likely to be down the basement making tuna fish sandwiches rather than being up front. So I mean, that's part of, you know, for me, standing up in front of a group of people and talking about my school, I feel real comfortable talking about my school. Being a Norwegian Lutheran makes it a little bit harder than usual. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about our kids, what we do in Warba, in our school, but also kind of the evolution of how this school came about. And I think, you know, for all of us that work in charter schools, we are on the ground floor, and we really have to do everything. So in creating this school in Warba, I had worked a long time in alternative programs, and that's where Bill and I became acquainted. I was involved in a middle level program in Grand Rapids for a long time. And the longer we worked at it, the harder it got to get our share of the resources for our kids. We had 40 kids, and we were part of the Grand Rapids school system. And I think what Joe Graba said about why starting charter schools, autonomy, sustainability, and a vision of a different school has been very true for our experience. One of the enlightening experiences for us was looking for a sponsor, and I know everybody that's in this room has had that experience. So we sent out a bunch of letters to different potential sponsors, and we got one response from a guy named Jim Yeager in Duluth, who runs Northwood Children's Services. So we set up a meeting with him, and Vicki Nelson, who's been a really key player in what we've done in Grand Rapids. She worked with Joe Nathan at the Center for School Change for a long time. She came with. And we sat with James Yeager, the CEO of Northwood Children's. It's a large continuum of services for kids, and a couple other of their staff. We told them what we'd like to do. And 45 minutes later, Dr. Yeager said, "We'll sponsor you." And we just about fell off our chairs. And at that point, it's kind of like, okay, we're on. This is going to happen. And I think there are times when it's terrifying, where you wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh my gosh, we got to do this. And there are other times when you go, yeah, we're going to do this and we're going to do it well. So we opened 3 years ago. We had another very challenging time finding a building. And for those people who have been in small towns working in charter schools, there's all sorts of turf issues. For example, after Northwood agreed to sponsor us. Former superintendent called Northwoods and threatened them. The director of human services in Itasca County called and said we're never using Northwood Children's again. And one other significant player in Grand Rapids called and said, you know, you're in trouble because you're sponsoring this charter school. So finding a building, needless to say, even though there's an open building, elementary school in Grand Rapids right now, one of the conditions that the Y could lease that building was that they didn't lease it to us. So here we are in Warba. Norm Chafee, who's been another huge help for us, he's helped us with facilities a lot. Walked into the old antique market in Warba and said, this is what you're looking for. Lease this space. So we've been in this building in Warba, and a little bit of trivia, that the Warba people, is 183 people in Warba, and they made this t-shirt called the Center of the Universe when they had a town reunion, and it turns out there's another Warba in the world, and it happens to be in the Middle East. So they just found that out, and they go, oh no, there's more than one Warba. But Warba School was closed in 1993 by the Grand Rapids School District to save money. And Warba could have leased this building, but they didn't. They really couldn't afford it as a community center. So it was open for about 5-6 years as an antique market. And we still get people walking into our building looking for antiques. And they're usually kind of old folks trying to find a bargain. But we got this building, and gradually we've been fixing it up. We expected 70 kids the first year, and the first day of school 82 kids came through the door, and by the end of the first year we had 110, I think. Last year we expected 85, and I think we got up to 114 at one point. This year we're right around 100. We have had a fabulous experience with these kids, and I always tell the kids that for adolescents to make a decision to come to a new school and try something different is an incredibly courageous act. One of the things that I passed out here is a story about one of our kids, Kelsey Mead. Kelsey got involved with a statewide organization called the Minnesota Alliance with Youth, and they have a student leadership group that works on issues related to youth around the state. And Kelsey did a wonderful job working with those folks in that organization. Last summer when Laura Bush came to town, they asked Kelsey to be part of that. And I mean, if all of you could have heard the phone call from her dad when he told me about this opportunity for Kelsey, it was just amazing, because you know, here he was so proud of his daughter, and this opportunity came from what Kelsey had been able, some of the experiences that she'd been able to have at our school. So it was one of those things for us where we're trying to connect kids all the time with experiences, adults, those kinds of things that they may not ordinarily get to have. I was also going to tell you, last June we had 10 graduates, and this is our second graduating class. All 10 kids moved on to some really neat opportunities this fall. Kelsey's at Anoka Ramsey Community College, another girl's at Concordia College, a couple kids are working, a couple kids are in technical schools. When they've come back this fall, it's just been wonderful to see them and have them share their stories with other kids. So that's, as we grow, it's been fun to see how much a part of our school these kids feel, and they really do connect. One of the other things that, you know, the Department of Ed puts on is training for new directors before your school opens, and there were 15, 16 schools opened the same year that we did. And generally speaking, it's a pretty long week hearing about finance, and I mean, you got all this stuff to do back at your school, and you're hearing about the kind of the guts of the Department of Ed. One of the things that I remember was a panel of practitioners coming in and talking about the mistakes they made in setting up their schools. And to me, that was real reassuring that we're going to make mistakes, and some of these people have made huge mistakes in terms of what they've done and how they've done it. And we've made lots of mistakes in the first couple of years of our school. But I think for all of us, the response time to when something goes badly to when you can fix it is really, really quick. So one of the other experiences that happened last winter that kind of reflects everybody's horror story is that we had a young man who was in our school. I had known his family for years and years, and he was the prototype loner, picked on kid, struggled in school, just, you know, fish out of water kind of kid. Well, Chris brought an unloaded revolver to school last December, and we stuck it in his file cabinet, and the kids who had seen it on the bus thought it was a squirt gun. So the middle of the morning, a couple other kids came to me and said, Dave, you know, we don't know if this is a squirt gun. I think we should check it out. To make a long story short, Chris had brought this to school. His brother had been picking on him all week, and there were some other issues, but he was crying for attention, and he said as much. But we were so proud of our kids in terms of how they handled it, and how in the school community we could circle up and say, hey, something horrific has happened to Chris and to our community, and we need to deal with it. So that night we called every parent, sent a letter home with kids, and Chris got the help that he was looking for. He got his GED. We went and visited him, and while he was in the county jail, went and did some homebound stuff with him. So, I mean, we were able to say, all right, this is an awful, awful deal, but let's get through it and, as a community, support him. Key elements in our school. Last year we had 105 kids at one time. I think we had 21 adults. We have used extensive use of the AmeriCorps program. There's a setup called Promise Fellows. We had 5 Promise Fellows last year. One of the most delightful people in our building is a foster grandparent, a guy named Rod Lentz. And Rod was the middle school custodian for 27 years. He knows everybody everywhere. And somebody comes into our school, Rodney will make some kind of connection with them and make them feel comfortable. We've also used project managers. Project managers are unlicensed teachers. We have a professional potter, professional carpenter, and a professional musician. And those guys work with small groups of kids and really bring projects along and lessons along, those kinds of things. And that's been a huge part of our school. This year we have almost 2 full-time staff with off-campus experiences for kids. James Lewicki has worked with us for the last 3 years, and we contract for 10 days of James's time. And one of the reflections of the staff last year is this off-campus focus is really, really important for all of us. We really believe in it. So a guy named Danny Friedman is .7 staff, and Victoria is full-time staff, and what they're doing is bringing kids off campus. So we really made a big push on it with it. James had experienced this at Northwoods and Rhinelander, and I think it's something that will continue to evolve. A couple of huge issues that have come up. Special education, I mentioned it before when we were talking. Just demographics, I think last year we had like 53% free and reduced lunch. We really could have had probably 70 free and reduced if all the forms were in. We had about a 30% special ed rate. We have, I think, quite a few unqualified special ed kids. So you've got some demographics that describe your kids to a certain extent. I think, and I've worked in special ed for 30 years, I think the issues are huge in terms of how we serve those kids. One of the ideas that we use is to build on those kids' strengths and the gifts that they have, rather than make it a deficit model. We have a lot of kids who come to us and said, you know, that special ed classroom at the high school or whatever, they feel like they got EBD or LD written on their forehead, and they don't like it, they're tired of it. So they kind of feel liberated when they come to us and say, hey, we're going to do it different. When I taught in St. Paul, we did some training with a guy named Royven Feuerstein, who did some work with a curriculum called Instrumental Enrichment. It's really, really intriguing stuff. And one of the ideas that he has is that cognition potential is modifiable. And we have used this curriculum off and on through the years. There's a book I just read called The Blind Side, and it really talks about a young man who was raised on the poor side of the tracks in Memphis, and how the IQ testing that was done really wasn't accurate. But I think Feuerstein's ideas have stuck with me through a long time, and I really believe that a lot of the paperwork we get with kids and description of them don't fit. You know, they come to us and they are totally different kids. When I worked in the Grand Rapids School District, we had a pull-out middle-level program, 40 kids. Kids would fail intentionally to try to come up to our program because they knew that the kids liked going to school, they were engaged, and the middle school folks were so mad because these kids were failing on purpose, and they didn't think that was right. One of the other things that happened in Grand Rapids that's really a big part of my life is something called a Community Peace Initiative. When we moved up there in 1991, there had just been a horrific murder. And the people whose daughter was murdered, a guy named Don Strufert and his wife Mary, Don teaches at UMD now, convened a retreat for 25 people in the Grand Rapids community to try to share their horror, but also to educate people about the violence in kids' lives. Itasca County is a very poor county. It could be the poorest county in the state. And there are some humongous issues having to do with poverty. But this retreat, we spent 5 days with judges and probation officers, and teachers and other folks, and it was a powerful experience, not only in terms of restorative justice and what this family had done to try to heal, but also how can they share this with the rest of the community. So for me, that's been a huge kind of emotional support of why work in the environment and the kids that we do, because a lot of these kids come from really tough homes. Finally, my father-in-law was one of those guys that I'd call ready, fire, aim. First time I went out boating with him, forgot to put the plug in there, you know, and we're out in the bay. And so I was going, watch out. And calmly, he rowed us over the side, took his pocket knife out, cut off a branch and stuck it in the boat, and you know, off we got. We were fine. But I mean, some of what I believe in schools, there are so many opportunities for kids that end up being ready, fire, aim, where you don't know what the outcome is going to be and what the connection are. It could be a relationship with another adult. But I think all of us really need to be aware of that. And I think we're getting kind of boxed in a lot of traditional schools. We know a lot of traditional, you know, mainstream teachers in Grand Rapids, and they feel absolutely boxed in by standardized tests, and it's deadly. So anyway, I like the freedom, the flexibility, the autonomy, the sustainability of our school and what it's done for kids. So if anybody has any questions, yeah.
I just have to explain, Dave was telling the whole story. They have some of the lowest turnover in staff, so you know it's a good place to work, and I think that's part of his good stuff. But I was up there a month ago, and they had open house that night. To me, it looked like chaos. I'd have been driven insane, but they were just ordering their food in. They decided what they're going to eat, and Dave comes up and says, well, I'm scheduling a softball game at 2 o'clock. And by the way, you know, they're looking at someone else to hire, and it was kind of a group effort of who they were hiring, and that impressed me no end. I'm sitting there going, I was so in awe of your group, it's awesome, but the fact of how they all worked together, and it was a group effort to decide who they were hiring, but the fact that you don't have much turnover, to me is part of your success story too. So I just wanted to say it's not just the logistics or some of the basic students. I think it's about the teaching staff too, so, and the support staff.
Thank you.
I said if you could put that in how to hire someone, and put how they work together. If he could present this and go from school to school, I think everyone would benefit from it tremendously.
We have a fabulous staff. Brian.
Dave, you received students at your school a couple of times. Can you tell us what that's about?
Oh, hosting other
Yeah.
schools? Yeah, I mean, we extend invitations for folks to come out and share experiences with our kids. And, I mean, essentially bunk in the building. When Bill's kids came up a couple weeks ago, I was telling them in the lunch line, they joined us for rec time at the end of the day. Some of our kids said, hey, can we stay overnight, camp out back? And all of a sudden it's ready, fire, aim, you know. We got a little tent city out in the back and played tackle football till 10, basketball till midnight, and hide and seek till 2. Well, I mean, by the end of the week, those guys had bonded. I mean, it was a great experience for those kids. And it's partly camp, partly school, partly you know, experiential ed, but we like doing that. We've taken kids to Denver. We had a group of kids go to London last spring. The experiential part of what we do is really important. But hosting other schools and connecting with other schools. We had a great conversation up here this morning about how can we facilitate that with schools from around the state. So we're real open to that. And I know we've talked about coming down, recording arts, and using that facility.